Would like to call to order this special meeting of the Clive City Council on March 26th. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Council members Weaver.
Here.
Judkins. She was here.
Hope we didn't lose her.
Klein.
Here.
Hawker.
Here.
Gasparotto.
Here.
Susan, have you reconnected?
We'll check back with her.
That's what Pete's for.
Yep, I can see that Councilmember Judkins is still in the meeting. Councilmember, are you able to unmute?
She must be having tech issues.
Traveling, maybe she's in a bad spot.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
All right. We'll
can
move on then.
Yep.
We're here for the 26-27 property tax hearing as required, and we'll start with presentation.
So thank you, Your Honor. Tonight, we are here as required by state code to discuss the proposed property taxes for fiscal year 2026-27 in the proposed budget. These are pieces of information for those in the audience that have been shared in the mayor's State of the City address on cityofclive.com and on a number of publications. When you walked in, if you didn't pick up one of these, I encourage you to grab one. The material we're going to go over here very briefly is also in this handout. You may have received, or should have received, if you're a property owner in Clive, a statement like this. This is actually mine that I received, that starts to outline some of the proposed budget and property taxes being presented by different taxing entities in the city of Clive. Your three big ones are going to be the city, Polk County or Dallas County, depending on where you live, and then the school district that covers the area where you live. The challenge we have with these is that they are inaccurate, in part because they do not have the correct, or I should say I have a somewhat flawed tax rate comparison equation in them. And so to make sure that you all have accurate information, we like to lay it all out for you and present the actual changes that are being proposed in the budget that the council has constructed with staff. There is an increase in the total amount of property taxes that the city of Clive is proposed to collect in this coming fiscal year. But that are not new taxes because the city is increasing the property tax rate. In fact, the city is going for the 10th consecutive year to keep the rate either level or decrease it. 2 years ago, in fact, there was a 22% decrease per thousand of taxable valuation. The reason that there is additional revenue coming in is because we have had some changes in assessments, which have generally increased. The property tax rollback on residential property is different this year than it was the previous year. And while we are reaching build out, Clive does continue to grow, and we add new properties to the tax rolls that previously weren't homes or businesses that had been constructed. So in the effort to show everybody the accurate picture of what you should expect as a property tax payer in Clive, we've created our residential property tax calculator. The example that's in the mailing that you received uses an example of a $110,000 home in Clive, and they come up with an estimate that the percent change in the tax rate would be effectively 3.18% increase, when in truth, when we do the calculations more accurately, we see that for that hypothetical home, there would be a 6% decrease in the property taxes that would be paid to the city of Clive. In this case, about a $31 change. Now, there aren't a lot of homes in Clive that are $110,000, and we want you all to be able to put numbers in there that correspond with your actual property value. But before we show you that whole calculator and give you the link to go there and start working with it yourself, we want to make sure that we share what are the priorities that the council has put forward with this budget. First, they want to keep their property taxes fair and predictable. We want to make sure we maintain adequate cash reserves to weather changes in state legislation, the housing market, or the broader economic environment. And for those reasons, the city has decided to keep the property tax rate at $9.92 per thousand of taxable valuation. And as I mentioned before, this is the 10th consecutive year that the rate has really remained level or has decreased. The other point to note is that the City of Clive has a strong history of fiscal stewardship. We can budget very conservatively, and we do not expect the expenses in the proposed budget to reach the 100% mark. Relative to our peers, Clive also maintains one of the very lowest property tax rates and has for a long time. You can see on the screen here a comparison of the proposed rates for all of our neighboring communities, and there's quite a range, but historically Clive has stayed on that low end, again, $9.92 for this coming year. Here's probably the most illustrative slide that lays out sort of the experience that the council would like to give residents and businesses as they think about their property taxes. This is an assessment not just of your property tax today versus what's proposed in 2027, but it also adds in those other costs for your utilities and for the franchise fee. And when we do the math, you can see that for our hypothetical house valued at $318,000, residents in that property are going to see a decrease of sort of their total burden of cost to the city of about 4.2%, or in this case, actual dollars, $116.92. For a typical Clive business, there's a very modest increase of 1.2% to $167.52. Again, these are households that have typical utility usage in the City of Clive. Property taxes can be complex. And one of the reasons they're complex in Iowa is that there are many entities that are creating budgets and proposing property tax levies. Both in Polk County and Dallas County, though, the City of Clive only makes up about 30% of that total tax bill that you would have received. And you can always, when you get your property tax statements, flip them over and make sure that you look on the back to get an explanation of what that breakdown is. Here are the key goals that the council wants to achieve with the budget they are proposing. We want to make sure we stay financially sound as a community, that we are resilient with our facilities and infrastructure, that we are revitalizing some of the older parts of Clive around the 86th Street corridor. We call them the 86th Street neighborhoods. And as always, remain a great place for people to live, the premier location for families. Part of the reason why I think we can all agree that Clive is that place is because we have a wonderful and distinctive Clive Greenbelt, and we want to be good stewards of that. Each year, the council goes through strategic planning and sets a number of goals and priorities and then ranks those. I'm not going to go through all of these items here, but what is important for Clive residents and businesses to know is that this budget maps directly to these priorities that have been set by the council. The council goes through this prioritization process and strategic planning every year, and that keeps our budget disciplined and right-sized for the work that needs to be done. The total budget, if you include all of the capital spending that's been done and also the separate utility funds, which operate in ways sort of like their own business unit within the city, the whole package for the City of Clive is about $95 million for this coming year. On the left there, you can see the various categories that make up that total sum. Now, one of the biggest pieces of pie, the capital fund here is for the capital improvements project, and then the general fund is the second biggest piece of the pie. The general fund is 100% funded with your property taxes. And so when you want to think about where those property tax dollars go, most of them are going to go into these various buckets. Biggest bucket there being public safety. And then right after that, recreation and library and public works and general government. When we talk about that big piece of pie, the capital improvements, there's where we are talking about your big street investments, the park investments like the ones we see across the street here at Greenbelt Landing, which we're happy will be opening. The goal is to cut a ribbon to officially open that at the 50th Clive Festival. That'll be later on in July. There are a host of other capital investments, though, that need to be made so that we can keep our infrastructure reliable, resilient, and right-sized. Now, let's break down these numbers into some that are a little bit smaller so you can understand this idea of value for the property taxes you paid. When you look at that total property tax bill and start then breaking it down by per day cost for that typical house, you can see that we're getting great value, we believe, across a number of different service areas for a very modest investment. In this case, the $318,000 home would be paying $3.85 a day. Breaking that down even further, that's about $1 a day for excellent public safety services, about half of that for your recreation and library costs, and 34 cents for your public works, including all of your snowplow work. So here's the calculator that I mentioned before, and this is also available on cityofclive.com. It's on a link that you can get to right away from the front page. So all I like to remember is cityofclive.com. But when you plug in then your specific property value for your home, it will take you through a sort of comparison where you'll be able to look at the current budget year, the proposed budget year, and then it makes the calculations for you already to input the appropriate rollback number for the residential rollback value. And then it will also come up with your estimated taxable property value. Now, again, this is a revaluation year, so we know there's some changes here. But if we were comparing apples to apples, a $318,000 house versus a $318,000 house today, then you will get this readout below, which breaks down all of the dollars going to the different levies, and then within the general fund where those dollars are going for specific service areas. In this scenario, there would be a modest $7.63 decrease per month in the total property tax burden for our $318,000 Clive house. Couple more slides to quickly move through, and then we'll be happy to take questions. Local option sales and service taxes, that is the extra penny that you're paying on eligible purchases in the city of Clive. Half of those dollars that we collect through that must go toward property tax relief. The way that we have been doing that for multiple years is to use the funding to offset what would have been a property tax increase to pay for the debt on the new public safety building. So the public safety building now, it's hard to believe, I think we're already 5 years old with that building. And it's served us extremely well. We built it and it came in under budget, and it's been an excellent facility for our first responders. The debt associated with that, though, is something we need to pay off over time, and our local option sales and services funds are going to help pay for that debt. It's also helping with our collaboration with the city of Urbandale, Fire Station 43, which I'll mention again here in just a moment. This is a station that's in far northwest Clive, really serving a big chunks of the sort of far western part of Polk County and Clive and all of the Dallas County portion of Clive. The neat thing about that station is that it's not just serving residents of Clive, it's actually serving multiple other communities there. It's actually an Urbandale station, but we have a closest unit response agreement with them and a shared service agreement with them. It saves us millions of dollars compared to the cost of building a Clive specific station that would have only duplicated what Urbandale or other neighboring communities would have built in that space. A little bit more there about how we're saving tax dollars and delivering valuable services. These opportunities to collaborate, especially in the fire, EMS, public safety area, are important because, again, that's one of the biggest drivers of what's using property taxes in the general fund. That's the biggest sort of piece of pie within the general fund. In some communities in Iowa, it's even bigger than the piece of pie that I showed you just a moment ago for Clive. So as much as we can find opportunities to collaborate and save, but still keep service levels extremely high, that's going to allow the council and all taxpayers in Clive to be able to keep those property tax rates fair and predictable moving into the future. I mentioned Station 43. The total savings there, $1.3 million compared to the cost of Clive building, owning, and operating its own station.
That's not cool.
$630,000 in savings because we are going to be optimizing sort of the ways that Station 42, which is the new building, and Station 43, which is the Urbandale Collaborative Station. We're sort of improving the way that they are covering through the city, and that's going to allow us to sort of right-size our relationship with West Des Moines and Station 22, which is over by the newly named Atlas building, just off of University Avenue. We also have a new agreement with Urbandale on reserve apparatus. So this is the ladder and the engine that the fire department uses. A lot of times those reserve vehicles were sitting, not moving very often, but it's an expensive thing to have sitting all the time. So does every city need to have its own reserve apparatus? we worked with our partners at Urbandale and determined the best way to do that while keeping service levels high and keeping reserves where we need them. The best way to do that was to collaborate. And then interestingly, as we look ahead, we think there are a lot of other places where we might be able to realize some savings. So we're in the middle of a study right now with our partners in Windsor Heights, Waukee, and Urbandale to further review how we can collaborate and keep fire EMS services efficient. So summing it up, we want to make sure we keep delivering those high quality services and infrastructure in every Clive neighborhood. We want municipal taxes and fees in Clive to be fair and predictable for residents and businesses. And this coming year, for a typical Clive household, there will be a decrease in sort of the total cost of services, not just the property taxes, but the total cost of services, including your utility payments, of about $116. That's a 4.2% decrease for the previous year, and a modest $167.52 increase for the total year, 1.2% for a typical Clive business. And again, I direct you to cityofclive.com if you'd like to work with the calculator, or if you find other information about the budget. All of the previous budget presentations that the council reviewed in February are online. And staff and your council members are also available to you if you should have questions. And we have time for questions tonight if there are any from the audience.
If there are no questions from the audience, are there any from the council for Pete this evening?
Pete, just to confirm for this budget for FY 26-27, this is the 10th consecutive year that the city of Clive has either lowered their tax levy or kept it at a steady, the same level. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Dave Gatos, 20001 Fountain Drive. The $110,000 hypothetical home, in the past where we've lived, there's always been, a hypothetical home. Not realistic with anything where anybody lives. Why do you use that?
So this is not something that we get to pick. So for folks online and for the sake of the recording, the question was, why $110,000 home in these statements that are sent out by the county? My understanding is that those are required parameters set by the state in the statute. It is, as I mentioned before, not really realistic for properties in Clive, residences in Clive. That's why we created a calculator so folks could go and put their actual dollar figure in and see where those dollars would go in the proposed budget.
Not anymore.
One more.
Yes.
There was a newspaper article or wherever we saw maybe something from the city that talked about how many fire is here, how many emergency calls get made, 911. What's the nature of those calls? That seems extremely high.
Sure, I might be calling on the Chief Garcia here to speak to that as well, and also Chief Rayberg. Maybe I'll take a stab at it here real quick, and then the chiefs can rein me in as needed here. But not knowing exactly what you were hearing, it's important to note that when we have calls for service that come into the Clive Fire Department or the police station, they may not always be for events that are happening in Clive. It's very important that we have those close student response agreements in place with our partners in Urbandale on the fire EMS side, and mutual aid agreements with our police departments. I'll give you a good example of why these collaborations are important. Back at the beginning of the year, we had a visit from sitting president. There's no way an event like that we could handle just with our own resources. We needed to be able to call on our neighbors, and there were dozens of other agencies that showed up to help. And we're very grateful for that because the event went off very seamlessly. Everybody stayed safe. People were able to exercise their rights. So that's a somewhat more extreme example. But even if it's just on the day-to-day onesie twosies, there'll be a time when an ambulance is out on one call and you still need to make sure that those services are showing up. So my guess is some of the numbers you saw looked high because it may not have just been in Clive's corporate boundaries, but other calls where the Clive assets were needed for some other type of response. But if you have that link, we'd be happy to take a look at it. And then I'm sure the chiefs would have some information on calls too.
I guess it seems high because we're obviously very fortunate because we don't see a lot of emergency vehicles in our area. And so I go, So what's happening everywhere else?
Valid question.
Of course, thank you for the question. For folks who just got here as well, we've got, if you're here for the special meeting on Clive's proposed property taxes, that's what we're in the middle of right now, not the regular council meeting. That'll start at the top of the hour. Yes, sir.
Mayor and council, I just want to give you kudos for the amount of effort and time it takes to perform and make this budget, staff time as well. I know it's not the most fun process and it's not a quick process either, so kudos to you all at this point. Watching you previously in some other meetings earlier this month, I appreciate your due diligence and thought. So, thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
So do we have any other questions from the council or anyone else in the chambers during this special meeting? Going once, going twice?
You want to check and see if there's anybody online?
Oh, check.
Yeah.
There's a chat on there.
This is Susan.
This is,
Okay, we're good.
Yeah,
We're
Pete,
good?
there's just Susan and I online, so.
Okay.
oh.
Very well. We will adjourn this special meeting of the Clive City Council at 5:51. Thank you all for being here. Next up, is there action the council would like to take in open session?
I'll make a motion to approve the settlement agreement.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the settlement agreement. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 4-0. Next up, we have our reports. And Matthew, do you have anything?
The only correspondence were in the packet.
Thank you very much. Pete?
Thank you, Your Honor. So earlier this week, we started our process of moving to the Community Connect payment platform. As part of our strategy, we wanted to bring certain groups of folks who are paying today, in some ways, across first before we started moving the larger group of folks who are using the existing online payment platform over to Community Connect. So that first group that we wanted to start with, we call them the ACH group. These are folks who have an automatic withdrawal from their checking or savings account. We did lots of contingency planning, but did run into a blind spot as we were doing the work. We found that in our process, we cannot have folks who are simultaneously signed up for ACH payment through our old payment portal, simultaneous with our new payment portal. On top of that, because of the timing of when we will bring those payments sort of forward in the middle part of a month, the timing of getting March's bills paid while we were bringing people across to have them ready to go for future April billing got a little mashed up as well. So we've learned a lot in a short amount of time, and our utility billing team has done some very quick work on getting ready to handle the casework and bringing folks through this process if they'd like to stay with the ACH process. At this time, we've layered that with some additional communications, but I do expect you may have some constituents who have some phone calls. The best way for them to quickly, I think, get this resolved is to take a casework approach. So if they're willing to give us a phone call, we've got the information up on the page about Community Connect, and it's also right there up front and center on the front page of the website. They can also email utilities@cityofclive.com. At the rate that we're moving right now, we expect that the roughly 1,500 addresses that received the initial letter because they were using the ACH payment process, they received a letter from us middle of the month. We've already dealt with multiple hundreds of those folks. We think at this rate, we'll be able to get many, if not most of them resolved before we get into the next month of billing. We also have some other strategies for when we're going to sort of stop the previous ACH system from being able to process payments. And when we do that, it will sort of open up the ability for a more seamless setup for the new Community Connect ACH. I know there's going to be some issues. I know we're dealing with different levels of sophistication with technology, but we do feel at this point that we've got a good process in place to manage the casework. So don't hesitate to direct people to us, please, quickly, so that we can work with them if they do run into any problems.
There's no chance we're going to double hit someone ACH, right?
So that's one of the things that we're most concerned about and best, I think, positioned now to make sure it doesn't happen. There will be in middle of early next week, the process of the old payment system kind of pushing those payments forward will happen. Before that happens, though, we're going to cross-check that list with our list of folks who have already signed up for the new platform, and then make sure that they haven't been set up to double pay to the best of our ability.
Yeah, we'll deactivate the old connection if we see that they're already set up on the new.
Yeah.
Okay. And then is the next phase credit card auto pays?
And anybody else who chooses to pay electronically, maybe who isn't set up for an auto pay or an electronic payment today, this new platform solves a whole lot of problems. First, it's cheaper per transaction, saves us all money, which is great. But it also solves an old problem we had that really came up during the lawn watering ban. We didn't have, even for people who were paying electronically, emails for a number of those accounts, which meant that we couldn't use that tool to directly communicate with folks about the lawn watering ban. Now we're going to have a much more robust sort of profile for folks who choose to go into that space so that we can communicate with them either through the portal or through their email if they opt in to get communications that way. So I think that'll be a nice addition from a process and engagement standpoint.
And kudos to Madison and our two utility billing specialists who've been dealing with a lot the last 4 days in terms of working with our customers to get them transferred over. And these particular ones with the ACH, they might have had it set up for 25 years. And takes a little bit more time to work through it because they're not as familiar with our online payment system. So we've been doing the best customer service we can, and the folks have been doing a great job with that.
The whole process is scheduled in our plan to take many months. So we start with the planning at the beginning of the year. We start the rollout with this targeted audience in March, and then a more full-blown engagement with everybody who's a utility customer, April, May, and June. After that, I think we'll be in a pretty good spot to evaluate if we need to continue the campaign in a robust way or if we're more in a targeted casework type approach. But we'll be able to track it carefully.
Anything else, Pete?
Couple things, Your Honor. So budget storytelling preparations. This has been a very busy week for me and Molly and all the people who help in the admin services team and other teams to make sure now that you all have given us direction on where you'd like to go with the FY27 budget. Now we need to make sure that we give all of the residents and businesses a chance to look at what you're considering as well. So by the time we get to the end of day tomorrow, we will have our budget storytelling assets up on the webpage. People will see it front and center on the front page. So you can easily tell them just to go to cityofclive.com. The calculator should be updated as well. I've got a version of it that's working well. I just need to now work with our website host, to add some of the formatting pieces to it. It works just like last year's did. So people can put in any property value they want and see what that means for how that will affect their municipal residential property taxes. So excited to get that underway. A lot of these assets then roll into the next thing I wanted to mention, which is preparations for the State of the City address. Not this coming week, but the following. The mayor will be delivering that at a chamber event. And I believe all of you are planning to attend as well. So I'll take care of all of those registrations for folks. When we put that deck together, it really becomes a nice tool for all of you as well when you're thinking about how do you kind of succinctly share what it can be very complex for a lot of people who don't have their brain in this all the time. So we look forward to setting that up for all of you and also creating new tools as you need them to do your due diligence for considering the budget, but on also sharing that information with your constituents. Finally, Your Honor, next week we will have another round of closures on the interstate overnight. Good news, though, this will be the round that opens up, weather permitting, the ramps here at University northbound and the off ramp onto Hickman when you're heading northbound on the interstate. The University on ramp northbound is one that I'm particularly excited it's going to be opening up because it's been putting a ton of pressure on 114th Street for a long time now. And it'll be nice to get that interstate traffic where it belongs. After that week of opening up the ramps and getting the new lane alignment finished on the interstate, the following week, still in March, there will be a number of overnight closures on Hickman, full closures on Hickman. And that's so that they can start the demolition work on the inside parts of the bridges. Once they've got that done, then they'll be able to get the traffic moving again on Hickman Road with some periodic closures as they're moving equipment around and getting some of that big debris out of the space.
When is the full closure of the intersection scheduled for?
The multi-week
Yeah.
closure, that'll be daytime closures too, not for a couple of years. I believe that was
2027.
Oh, I thought it was this summer.
No, 2027, and it will be months.
Months?
I would anticipate 2 months.
Yeah, I think they said 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
It'll be a little more.
On the caller, we actually talked about that. We saw the staging for the Hickman work, which is 2027. They haven't bid that out yet. That's getting bid here later this summer.
Nightmare.
There will be points at which they're doing all of the lanes underneath the bridges, redoing Hickman, that it'll be closed for, because there's also some storm sewer that they have to do underneath the road as well. So it will be, I would anticipate 2 months, and let's hope it's not 3.
That'll be an important communication piece in
Huge.
advance out, obviously,
Huge.
as we work on our storytelling with that.
Changes our public safety answering routes.
I would think we
too.
would want to work with Urbandale on that communication too, because,
Oh, yeah.
And we have been.
okay.
The interstate closures, Molly and I have really tried to stay on top of it because we think it's a commitment we made with Greenie. If you signed up to hear about road closures in Clive, even if it's not our road, but it's one that runs through Clive, like an interstate, we want people to know. So we've been staying pretty religious with keeping all of those updates. But anything that touches Hickman ever, whether it was the POTUS visit or whether it's this construction or future construction, you can bet this is top of the list to make sure we get that information out.
Anything else, Pete?
No, you are.
You want to give us any water updates?
I can, yeah. So looked like some little glimmer of good news with our water situation and nitrates at the beginning of the month has sort of turned on us, and it can move that quick. The nitrate removal facility was briefly turned off earlier in March, but it is back on as of earlier this week. As of last night, we heard that they were running 3 vessels of the total 8, but they can only run 7 at a time. Yep. So not full bore with that, but back on because we have in our source, and 2 of our source waters, we were above the nitrate standard and needed to be able to bring those nitrate levels down. So this spring, the member communities are getting ramped up to make sure that as folks think about energizing their irrigation systems, that they do it with conservation in mind, not watering when they don't need to. And when they do need to water, doing it only as much as is necessary to keep their lawns healthy and making sure you don't go out and water the street and other common sense things like that. I think this is going to be a really interesting year to figure out sort of what that song sounds like that we all sing together on watering smart. What's also exciting is that it's very much in preliminary place right now, and the board hasn't considered it completely yet, but the plan is in place now to launch a pilot project here in among the CIWW communities where we would be able to retrofit or initially set up some irrigation systems among willing customers that would have one of these smart irrigation controllers on it. And we could use that to gather data and sort of manage when watering is happening to see how much peak load shifting and peak load diminishing work we can do using some of these new technologies. We're optimistic that we can see some great results.
And the goal of that, I mean, what are we trying to achieve there with that, Pete?
Well, there's first off the goal of making sure that we have more ability to prevent the scenario we saw last summer. Nobody wants to go into lawn watering bans. And if we can shift peak, if we can go into more conservation practices, then we won't go back into that situation because of excess nitrates. We'll be able to hopefully manage them in a way with our existing infrastructure that we don't go back into that. So there is the benefit in that scenario of, again, continuing to meet all the safe drinking water standards. That's first and foremost. But second, this becomes a really interesting, cost-effective way for us to think about how much capacity do we actually need to build. It's expensive to build capacity. If we can, in effect, get that capacity we need by watering smarter and using the water we have today smarter than we currently are, that could be a more cost-effective way for us to get customers the results they need.
And again, we're looking at right now $1.2 billion in expenditures, but what you're talking about is in a pilot program, instead of all these companies watering, from 6 to 8 a.m., you spread it out overnight, and so you're not peaking as we're dealing with, so you don't need that excess.
That's right.
Capacity.
Yep.
So
there's also some day shifting you can do. That's despite all the odd even storytelling we've done, you look at the data, you still see that most people are, if they're watering 3 times a week, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah. And they're mostly overwatering.
Lots of that.
Providing much more water than they need.
Yep.
And while you have the floor on water, we sometimes hear about the significance of leaks. And of course, we'll have something in our newsletter this next month. But do you want to talk briefly about how you can avoid leaks?
Yep. So today, our utility billing staff, using a somewhat limited set of tools given the platforms that we have at our disposal, they run an algorithm that looks for excessive use, but it varies what we can customer to customer with what we can see because of how frequently their meter more or less pings. Is it a daily read? Is it an hourly read? Our algorithm, we only can put one in place, and so it struggles a little bit of time, sometimes differentiating between a leak that it's seeing over the course of a few hours versus one that would be over the course of a few days. And then there's the timing of when they actually see it. A more sustainable position in the future could be for us to start working with residents to give them information about devices they can attach in their own homes that would allow them to be notified on their phone when they have a leak. That this the same kinds of devices that can show them where they're using most of their water, where they might have chances for using less water and chances to save money as well, and set some goals even internally for what they'd like to do.
200.
Yep. So this is a device actually that I purchased. This Des Moines Waterworks has been in a partnership with this company Flume for a number of years now, where they were getting discounted prices for these devices for customers that wanted to install them. And you just can put it on your meter at home. I'm going to be doing that here with my meter here later this week. And then you can start to get this data. From a leak detection standpoint, this really empowers the property owner to get the knowledge, get it fast, not have to wait for a utility clerk, maybe being able to run the report or being out over the weekend when a leak started. This is a better way to really empower customers to make good choices about how they want to use water. So it could be an option for us to consider as a city moving forward, more research to be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I think if you all remember, Shrikant had a system on his
Mhm.
house with
He
that
did.
as well. And others,
I have
I'm
one
sure
now.
as well. Anything else, Pete? Any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Very good. Sadie?
This week, I served on a committee, hiring committee for the Waukee Schools superintendent. That interview process wrapped up this week, and the board announced Dr. Andy Kozier as their selection for the new superintendent for Waukee Schools. That goes to the board actually tonight for the final approval. But great candidates. The process was very in-depth, and I think they went through a 12-hour day that day of interviews from all sorts of different student groups, community groups, parent groups, certified staff, teachers, all sorts of different groups that they went through. So great candidates. The top three, there wasn't necessarily a wrong choice, I don't think, between the three of them when I met them in just that narrow scope of an hour. But I think they were great candidates, and I think they did a great job with the process.
Very good. Thanks, Sadie.
Yep, thank you.
No report tonight.
Eric?
A couple of things, attend the chamber dinner, annual celebration with all the council members here. Thought it went very well. Also give presentation to West Kirk Presbyterian Church members on Greenbelt and the Greenbelt Landing, and visit with the Country Club West HOA on installing a tree planting program there in the barrier against Hickman, as we've done assessment and seen the degradation of the tree line, which also has a sound barrier. So we talked extensively, and it could be working with Trees Forever. I don't know yet, and the city possibly, but continue to replace those trees along Hickman Road that acts as a sound barrier and helps to beautify that neighbor as well. So we're continuing to work with them.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And I think all of you saw my note about DART, and they'll be looking for a new CEO.
I asked Amanda today at MPO how in the world she could move to Minneapolis, like moving to the belly of the beast.
Yeah, no good answer for that.
No, there wasn't.
Nothing to report.
Anything legal?
No, Your Honor.
Just a couple quick updates. While the state of the city is happening as of right now on the schedule, on the 24th, we were notified earlier, actually yesterday, by the Secretary of Agriculture's office, Secretary Negg's office, of that particular week. He is doing a kind of an agricultural tour week to all different projects that are in the state and wants to visit Greenbelt Landing. We are hoping to maybe adjust the time slightly, because right now the time is 12 to 1 on the 24th. But it is going to be kind of a quick visit that he just wants to walk around the site with Richard, our project manager from the city, potentially Pete as well, as somebody who's been an advocate for WQI and our ISWEP partners. So we'll see how the timing plays out. It's going to be a relatively small group. But we're hoping to adjust the time slightly. So we could, a couple more of us could come out and say hi. So I'll keep the council updated as we finalize that schedule. It kind of came up last minute. But we're glad that the secretary wants to come out and see. Obviously, we have WQI, substantial amount of WQI funding. This is water quality initiative funding from IDOLS in the project across the street. So now that we're actually, because with the ground now not frozen anymore, we're really getting the building done with the bio cells and a lot of those water quality elements. So there's a lot to see now in terms of the holes in the ground. So, and the wetland walkway, we actually have the boardwalk over it. And with some of these heavy rains, we've actually had it fill up a little bit. So it'll be good for the secretary to be able to see that. So we're excited for that. And then just to mention the next council meeting, we will start a little early with a different meeting, which is the normal budget public meeting that's required by state law. That will occur at 5:30 at your next council meeting in 2 weeks. Similar to that, I will be virtual for that meeting as I'll be over at a conference in Iowa City. And so we'll have the brief kind of budget overview presentation. I'm actually going to have Pete do that for the 5:30 meeting. And then we'll have the regular council meeting starting at 6, which following that budget public hearing, then you can consider setting the formal the formal budget adoption public hearing for the April 9th meeting. So we'll be going through some of those budget procedures at your next meeting. And one of the items too that we'll have on the list for discussion is Chief Rayberg will be bringing forward kind of our current status and language of the e-scooters, bikes ordinance that's been worked on. And he will be presenting that as a discussion item at this point for you all to provide some feedback. And then we'll seek your direction on ordinance readings moving forward. So with that, Your Honor, there's one other thing I would mention too, as we wrap up tonight, if there's any of you who want to pop down and see kind of where we're at with the renovations downstairs, happy to take you around. We were actually laying carpet this week, so it's starting to look a lot more finished. And really, it'll be the parking lot work that you all approved tonight that will be the driver for when we can get folks back in the building, because it's really dependent on when the asphalt plants get fired up there for the overlay, because we want to get that north piece done before we move staff back in. But happy to take you on a quick tour after the meeting tonight if you're interested. That's all I have, Your Honor, unless there's any questions.
Right, Eric.
Good question. Matt, I couldn't help but to notice that PFM increased their retainer fee 75% this year. And then next year increasing it 122%. And then in 28, even more. What's the basis behind these very, very large increases in their retainer fee?
Yeah, so the retainer fee has not been addressed for over a decade. And over the last couple of years, we have been well exceeding the retainer fee hours that they provide with a number of the projects, particularly on the utility side, but also on the tax analysis side in terms of the amount of hours that they're spending with us. Of course, when we're changing the structure of our stormwater utility fee, changing our water utility this year, a ton of research that was put into that. They've been well exceeding that number for a number of years and have made us aware of it. And as I talked with that team, is recognizing that we're asking a lot more of their time every year than we ever have. And that will continue going forward in my mind, particularly as we talked about tonight with some of the tax analysis related to property tax bills, TIF analysis, that we were well overdue to adjust that number. But we wanted to do it in a more phased way. It is definitely a big jump, but it's been long overdue.
That's a big phase, Matt.
It is a big phase. I recognize that.
That's their fault for not addressing this for 10 years. That's not our fault.
True. But I think I also recognize that they've been well in exceedance of $20,000 in staff time to us, that we felt in terms of the relationship and the amount of hours that we anticipate using them going forward, that it was time to catch up and we were behind. Yes, I would also argue we've been seeing the benefit of them giving those services without compensation for a number of years. And now we're trying to get to that level of what they're truly providing us.
It's a big jump.
Understand?
Anything else for the good of the order this evening? Hearing and seeing none, will adjourn at 8:04.